So in today's video, I am sharing a news story, which is almost so unusual that it is really hard to believe it's true. And you may or may not have heard about this in the news. It involves a 2-year-old being shot by a 3-year-old that are in a parked vehicle. But here is the kicker. The gun belonged to the pastor of the church. These were the pastor's children. So I'm going to play for you the video of the news talking about this incident. Then we're going to come back and discuss. Remember, this is a 2-year-old being shot by a 3-year-old with a firearm that belonged to the pastor of the church. Let's take a listen to the video. We're going to come back and discuss.
River Valley Baptist Church and lives next door. He and his wife heard the gunshot and the screams coming from the parking lot after deputies say a 2-year-old was accidentally shot in the head inside a car. The couple stayed up much of the night praying.
Our hearts just go out to them. And so we'll help in any way we can. And but God is the help that you need.
Glen Alpine Fire posted these photos of a medical helicopter landing nearby to airlift the 2-year-old to the hospital. Outside the church this afternoon, we could see the shattered glass near where the shooting happened. Investigators say another young child was in the car at the time. They're still trying to determine exactly how someone got access to the handgun and who fired the weapon.
This breaks my heart.
Teresa Jordan was home when the shooting happened. She could see church members gather around the little boy in the parking lot after the shooting. She told us she has weapons in her house, but takes precautions to keep them safely away from children. She can't imagine what the pastor and his family are going through now.
You think about, that's a pastor, and he wouldn't have had nothing in this world for his child to got shot. You know, that's what's so heartbreaking.
So there is a lot in there just in that short moment. And what we do know now, this is maybe considered a breaking story. This is less than 2 weeks old, so more information is still coming out. But we do know that a 2-year-old is safe and is well and is in a critical condition. But at the scene, they were able to talk and communicate. So it appears that as the child has been shot in the head, that they are going to retain most of their functions. Like I said, they were talking at the side there as medical practitioners were there helping them. So that is mostly considered a blessing by God. But did you hear what Teresa said? So the news they're really good at giving these little kickers. And here is what Teresa Jordan said, the lady at the end there. They said she has weapons in her house, but takes precautions to store them safely and away from children. So there is the inference there that this pastor wasn't doing that because his firearm got in the hands of a 3-year-old who somehow managed to pull the trigger and hit the 2-year-old in the head. So the news are really good at putting their own spin on it. There is a little kicker there. Now, I would ask you to do something. When you hear about this pastor whose gun has been used by his sons to shoot the other, think about what that looks like, because here is my next question. If the pastor avoids criminal charges, what will happen to reputation? So let's address the first part now. So it was his firearm. It was inside his car. It was clearly loaded. I find it hard to believe a 3-year-old could load a weapon, possibly, but I have to work on the assumption that the gun was loaded and is in a position where the 3-year-old can pick up the firearm and shoot the 2-year-old in the head. And again, an act by God that the 2-year-old survived and is okay. So if the pastor survives any neglect, any discharge, any allegations, any criminal charges surrounding why was his gun in the position of someone so young, how could they have access to it? What is his reputation going to be like post this event? How are people going to perceive him post the event that his children inside his vehicle managed to shoot one or the other? So if he avoids criminal charges, what is going to happen to his reputation? If I asked you to close your eyes now and think, you're already forming an opinion as to what you think about this pastor, good, bad, indifferent. So there is reputational risk. This is often unspoken about in houses of worship, and when things go wrong, there is a certain element of reputational risk. Are people going to judge him in the church? Are people going to leave the church? What's their perception going to be of a grown man that leaves a firearm in a vehicle which is loaded, and his two children are able to get access to that weapon, and one shoots the other? So really consider how these incidents affect the reputational risk. I want to show you something here which is also really interesting. So I obviously mentioned the pastor's 3-year-old son accidentally shot the 2-year-old brother. But here is the thing. Let me go up into here a second. The incident took place in the parking lot of the River Valley Baptist Church in North Carolina. And the news reports, I found 3 or 4 news reports. The news reports say this was while church was in service. So I saw at least 4 articles that I read that spoke about this and said that the incident took place in the parking lot of River Valley Baptist Church while the family were at church. Now, I don't know whether he was the youth minister, whether he was the executive pastor, whether he was a lead pastor, administrator, whatever it is. I can say from looking online, it's definitely a small church. But there is a lot to be said here in this story surrounding these 2 kids being inside the car with the firearm and the pastor being inside the church. The church was in service. So did the children leave and go inside the car? Did he leave them inside the car? There's so many questions there, but it's really interesting to the story that it took place inside the parking lot of the River Valley Baptist Church while the church were attending the service. So a lot of conclusions can be raised there, but again, we have a young child inside a vehicle with access to a firearm. And again, the victim may escape long-term health issues, but what of the reputation of the pastor for this church? What does that look like? So I want to talk now about 4 key takeaways, or really 4 pieces of information that we can use to either safeguard our own church or really discuss this incident, break out what could be done to prevent it from happening again. So when we look at the takeaways here, the first one is the importance of gun safety, especially around children. Again, you can judge me. I'm making some assumptions here. All I do know is that a 2-year-old and 3-year-old were in the position where they could take possession of a firearm, and the 3-year-old shoots the 2-year-old in the head. Act of God, that young child survives. So the importance of gun safety, especially around children. The second one, kids are a little bit like water here. They are like water, but they will find the path of least resistance. Have you ever had a water leak in your house and the water leak is on one side and the water's actually coming in somewhere else? Because water will find the path of least resistance. Children are the same. They are unpredictable in their actions, and you need to take necessary precautions, because if there's a button that says don't press this button here, if there's a light switch that you shouldn't press, they're going to press it. So we need to know that children are unpredictable here. That doesn't look like that mindset really translated here. And again, it looks like online, I'm going to drop a link to the news article. You can take a look if you haven't seen it. It looks like a small church, so maybe there was some complacency in there. I'm not too sure, but kids will be unpredictable and they will find the path of least resistance. So we need to understand that and make sure we're taking necessary precautions. That gun, that firearm should have been locked away inside the vehicle, or perhaps not even inside the vehicle in the first place when the children aren't there. The next point that I want to make, number 3, is about medical response is still most likely. So even though we are talking about a child being shot with a weapon, this is incredibly rare, for sure, incredibly rare. And in relation to an active assailant, there's been 188 active assailants where 3 or more people have been killed since 1966. I use the data from the Violence Project, my fellow Brit, Dr. James Densley, here in the Midwest in Minnesota with me. They've researched every mass shooting since 1966 to the current day. Presently, there's 188 where 3 or more people have been killed, and I believe 8 of those are in a house of worship. acts of violence are still incredibly unlikely. Where do we need to focus our attention is in relation to medical. Number 3, medical response is still most likely. How did this church administer basic life safety to this young child that had been shot while waiting for the emergency services to come? That is point 3. Medical response is still most likely. Make sure we are training practice, that we are ready for the things that are most likely medical response. Second one then is maybe domestic assault, domestic argument. The fourth thing I want to talk about, which I've mentioned a few times in this video, is how does this safety violation impact the reputation of the church? How does this safety implication affect the reputation of the church? Now, I asked you to close your eyes and think about this. 2 children have access to a firearm inside a vehicle. Now, I know from my audience, you are very astute. There's going to be 2 sides to this. Some people are going to be saying, well, that's why you should never have guns in this country and guns should be outlawed. And as people like me would say, it's not the guns for the issue, it's for people with mental illness that have the guns. The guns aren't killing people, the people are killing people. So I know in this video, there's going to be 2 sides to this story. However, we are going to form views and opinions. God gave us free will, and that free will means that we form our own views and opinions. And yes, sometimes we have bias. And how do you feel now knowing that a pastor had a firearm in his own car and his 2 young kids were in there, and one of them took the gun and shot the other one in the head? These safety violations are going to have ripple effects through that community. There's going to be some that are going to say this is tragedy. There could be some that are going to judge that pastor. There could be some that say, I don't want to go to that church anymore. But it's really important to always consider the reputation behind what we do. This will play into effect for sure. That information is going to change people's views. And then the last point that we have is the long-term implications, well-being of the congregation's criminal charges. So we saw an elderly gentleman in the video. We could see that he was distressed. And what did he say? The way to get through this is to pray to God. The way to get through this is to pray to God. So knowing that a young child has been shot in the parking lot of the vehicle is one of the reasons a few years ago we created our psychological first aid course. There is so much in relation to the emotional well-being of witnesses and people in the community. Only last year here in Minnesota, where I am, a young 19-year-old went into a Shields. He asked to see a firearm. He was given the firearm. He took ammunition out from his pocket, loaded the magazine, and then committed suicide inside that store, inside that Shields store. How are those people going to recover from being a witness to someone committing suicide in them? So the last and final point is really there will always be long-term implications, the well-being of the congregation. And there could, in this one, still to be determined, will there be any criminal charges against the person who should have had possession of that firearm, knowing that 2 young children clearly had access to a gun that one of them could then discharge on the other. So those are the 5 key takeaways: the importance of gun safety, especially around children, the unpredictability of children's actions and the necessity to take precautions. Medical response is still most likely. Yes, there is the danger of active assailant, but focus on those things that most likely day to day. If this had occurred at your church, how would you have responded from that medical aspect until the emergency services arrive? Number 4 was how do safety violations impact the reputation of a church? And number 5 was the long-term implications of well-being of criminal charges. So a really fascinating story. I'm sure more is going to come out in the coming weeks as we learn what truly happened inside the church, how his kids found themselves inside a vehicle with a firearm. But before we go, I just want to talk to you about these decision decks. So if you haven't come across these before, we have 6 different versions. Each are a deck of playing cards that have unique scenarios against a particular subject. So in my hand, I have the Crisis Intervention deck. This is a great deck to buy and give to your pastor because it has scenarios in here. We're going to test their judgment, critical thinking, and the response of a church. And as an example, just going to read one super quick. It says, a parent has come to you struggling with the death of their adult son, and they now want to take their own life. How would you respond and assess as a church leader? So each of these decks are designed to test your critical thinking, your judgment, and put you into scenarios that if you can try and work through the answer, if you ever find yourself in that adverse situation, you have something to fall back on for your decision. In times of crisis, the reason why I started to make these cards, in times of crisis, we do not rise to the occasion. We default to our level of training and understanding. We do not rise to the occasion. We default to the level of our training and understanding. These conflict de-escalation decks, these crisis intervention, the safety team, the suspicious behavior, the threat assessment and medical response will really help you on your safety and security journey. So I will drop a link below. But as always, those are my views of the incident where a pastor's son was shot with his own gun. What do you think of the case study? What resonates with you the most? What do you find most unusual right now? And what about the firearm being in a location where these two children could have it? And what about, well, why are they in the car in the first place, knowing that the pastor is inside the church? Why are they in a vehicle that has a firearm inside it, knowing that young kids are inquisitive? Remember, they're like water. The leak starts here and they end over here. We've got to take precautions. But as always, please drop your comments below. Let me know what you guys are thinking. And for now, you have a blessed day, you stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.